Welcome to our study on the book of Romans. We're in Romans chapter 6. We've been doing the 5 steps to produce the full assurance that we have been made dead to sin. We got through those first 3 steps, and the one where we talked about our old man is crucified with him. We were talking about also the provision that's been made for us when we got that old man crucified is your old identity, and we got through talking about the way that the old identity has now been replaced with a new identity, both in your justification and in your sanctification, so that now you can walk in newness of life, which you could never walk in before you were saved, because you have been made to be someone who actually now has this newness of life. Not only has it, but desires to walk in it. That gets cultivated there as well. Now, the 4th step is to understand this, that the body of sin is destroyed. All right. Before you trusted Jesus Christ as your Savior, you had a body of sin. Once you get saved, you no longer have a body of sin. Now we're going to talk about this because I just want to make sure this is clear in your mind. So far, if I were to say to you, your old man is crucified, you would say, if I were to say, what is your old man? You would be able to say to me, it is my old identity in Adam. That got put to death. And he put that to death. Our old man is crucified with him. And let me see this clicker, because I'm going to give you the next highlight here. I'm sorry, this is the same thing I put on the board, and I didn't realize I had put it on here. Knowing this, that our old man is crucified with him, your old identity is put to death, that, or for the purpose, the body of sin might be destroyed. So what is the body of sin? What was it he was destroying? Well, the old identification is put to death. Your old man, your old identity is put to death. And he said, I put him to death so I could destroy the body of sin. There's a single word I'm looking for. You already know this word. I need you to be thinking. Linda, did you have a... They're pointing at you. Oh, yeah, that has to, it has to do with that. Yes, the relationship. He put the old identity to death. Everything you were in Adam is crucified so that he could destroy the relationship you had to sin. And what was the relationship to sin? Okay, we were its servant. It was our master. So you see, he said, look, in order to destroy that relationship, I have to put that old identity to death. Does that make sense? Isn't it great? He did both of those. Now, when you look at those two, the old man is the identity in Adam. The body of sin is the relationship, the master-servant relationship. Do you know what's really great about that? When you look at that, there are 2 areas that are being dealt with there. Can anybody recognize those 2 areas being dealt with by those 2 things? Okay, yeah, one of them is an inner man issue, and the other one is an outer man issue. Remember, we talked about I put it on the PowerPoint. There's 2 big problems that had to be solved. Something had to be done with your inner man or your heart. And something had to be done about this physical body, because the thing running it had an attachment that made it a servant to sin. And so everything your body did came through that filter up here of sin. And so what he did is he said, I'm crucifying that old identity, everything you were in Adam, in you, putting that to death. Now, I'm destroying, and because I did that the body of sin might be destroyed, that relationship that you had as a servant under the dominion of sin is now completely destroyed, and that's an outer man issue, which means, all right, now I'm going to say this, sounds wacky, that connection in your brain, that master servant, I hate to say this way because you'll misunderstand me. Can I just say it this way and then I'll take it back? I need the jury to hear this, and the judge is going to say, objection, and I'm going to go, okay, I take it back. But here it is. That master-slave connection in your brain got done away with. So that now, when the brain goes, say this, do this, think this, your body doesn't have to do that anymore. In fact, the new you, the new identity, is actually going to be able to overrule the brain that put that in front of you. Because remember, it's still there making an appeal, but now you're going to be able to say no. Who was it last week? I think Karen said, just say no. Remember the old drug slogan? Now you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to say, no. That's not who I am anymore. I have a new identity. I'm not going to behave like I never have been made new in Christ. I'm not doing that. So with that fourth step, so I want to come back and revisit this just for a moment. That had to be done because, I'm going to say it this way. This is a really terrible way, but it's true about us. Before we were saved, we were a sin factory. That's what we were. Everything we did came from the boss that ruled us. We were a sin factory. So when we got saved and trusted Christ, here's what happened. The boss got fired. The factory got torn down. And now we produce something different. Instead of sin unto death, it's fruit unto holiness. Now we're not serving sin, now we're serving God. See? That's the great part about this thing. So let's see. There's something else that the Bible calls this, and this is a good place to say this, but before we put that last step up. And that is, not only did you have a body of sin, but there was another word that described your body. Corruption. Now, you know what naturally comes to our mind when we think about that? Rotten. Wanda says rotten. When do you think, when do we think about our body corrupting? When you're dead. Actually, that corruption, sin wants to do that every day that you're alive. Because we're defining corruption the way we normally use it in our understanding of the language. Do you recall a verse that talks about corruption? The Psalms predicted, and it's repeated in the book of Acts, that Christ's body, it says he would not leave his soul in hell, neither would he allow his body to see corruption. And when you read that, you think, okay, well, his body didn't rot away during those 3 days at all. Well, that's true, isn't it? That's true. His body didn't rot away during those 3 days. But let me ask you something. Oh, this is just too good. I'm just jumping ahead. My notes. Hey, what are notes? Hey. That body didn't corrupt away in the sense we normally think of it, but that's not the issue of corruption. That's a byproduct of corruption. Sin, let me ask you something. Even though you're alive, is your body corrupting? Now, not only do you see it in the physical sense, but sin, when the Bible talks about sin attempting to corrupt your body, we need to define that term, corruption, so that you'll understand everything that comes under that definition. Because it's not just about that your body is going to waste away when it's dead, or that it gets older and it begins to deteriorate. It's much more than that. And you have to see this, because what Jesus did, because this is the thing. If I can do this like this, here's the cross and here's the tomb, and we'll let the arrow be when he came out of that tomb, okay? Let's talk about the 3 days and the 3 nights of the burial, because actually, when you think about it, let me ask you this: how long did the resurrection take? Like that, right? I mean, when he said, time's up, time to resurrect, bang. On the cross. How long is he on the cross? 6 hours. How long is he in the tomb? 3 days and 3 nights. Do you think he's down in the heart of the earth playing checkers? Trying to get the winning lottery number? What's he doing? Okay, Doc says he's down there fixing it for us. And that's a pretty good description. He is fixing something for us down there. What is he doing down there? One of the things that he's doing is he is contending with the adversary for the keys of death and hell. That's one of the things. But the second thing has to do with the corruption that sin seeks to have on your mortal body. Because you're identified with that thing with him, right? You're identified in his death. And because you're identified in his death, your old man is crucified. There's the death. Now there's something you're identified with in his burial. And that has to do with the corruption issue. Because when Jesus dies on the cross, let me just ask you a question. When he dies on the cross, where does the Bible say he spent those 3 days and 3 nights? In the heart of the earth. So let me ask you, does he die while his body is still on the cross? Does he die while that body is on the cross? When they take that body down, is he dead yet? That body, it's dead already, isn't it? So where is Jesus when Jesus cries, "It is finished," and gave up the ghost? Where does his soul and spirit go? Well, heart of the earth in this case. Heart of the earth, okay? Now, okay, it is. Now, when he's in the heart of the earth, what's in his body? Wait. I know you're tempted to say that because he took on himself the sins of the world, right? But he doesn't die until what's complete? The payment for that sin. And when the redemption is complete, then he says what? It's finished. What does Satan want to do while he's being the sin bearer? Kill him on the cross. That way, when his soul and spirit leave that body, it's under the condemnation of sin. And if it happens that way, there's no resurrection. He's going to be down there with the sins of the world on him. But he finishes that. God pours out his wrath. In the last 3 hours, he's on that cross, and when he bears that and suffers the whole wrath of God against sin, and then he says it's finished, and now he gives up the ghost. He doesn't just, by the way, he gives up the ghost. Sin doesn't kill him. Sin kills us. That's what's going to do you in. You can say, well, they had liver failure. There's a process that was going on with sin in these bodies, and that's why these bodies are going to die. That's why James says, lust bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth what? Death. That's the end result of sin, death. And that's why, and we're going to see this, they're in the notes somewhere, sin and death are partners. You don't get one without the other. When at the end of Romans 5, sin reigned unto what? death, but righteousness unto eternal life. Sin and death are always partners, and you see this in the verses, and we'll come to those verses. But the part that I want to say to you is, when he dies and he's on that cross, is that body empty? I mean, is it void? I mean, yeah, it has organs in it, but I mean, his soul and spirit, it's not there, right? It's in the heart of the earth. Now, if his soul and spirit are in the heart of the earth, and that body is taken down off that cross, they're taking a dead body. Look, I go out the door today and drop dead of a heart attack in the parking lot, and you drag my body back into the air conditioning. Please. Where is my soul and spirit? Gonna be with the Lord. Okay? But my body, that's just that empty container, right? And that provision was made in the burial, as sin failed to corrupt the body of Jesus. Corruption. We'll come back next time, we'll talk about that. Because this is a great, the burial is almost the red-headed stepchild of the three parts of the gospel, isn't it? The death, we get it. The resurrection, we get. The burial doesn't mean much to us. It won't be that way anymore. Because you got planted. As a seed falls into the ground and dies, but it's doing that so it will produce much fruit. That's what's going to happen with us. That's what he wants out of us. And that's where he's headed in this thing. Okay, so this took twice as long as I thought it would take to get to this point, which means you're going to get notes that take you much further than where we got today. But that's okay. We're going to take up where we left off next time, and I want to walk you on through the rest of this corruption issue and your identity in his burial, and then we're going to take a look at how we got identified with him in his resurrection, and that's going to take us all the way up to verse 10 next week. You're not done yet. You still have 3 more verses to go to get the practical application of what we're getting here to be dead to sin. By the way, just give you the last one. This is verse 7. Now, free from sin's mastership. Now we've read through verse 7, but we're not through with the work on it. When we get through all 5 of those steps, when those are done, and you get to verse 10, you're going to have all of those steps working in you to produce an absolute assurance that you've been made dead to sin. And when that's really in your mind, it's going to produce a transition. And here it is. Last thing I'll tell you. It's going to go from you being able to say no to sin to you one day looking back at the things that you had to say no to, and now you have bore those things. You look back at the things that used to be a fight and an issue, and you're going to look back and you're going to go, I hate that stuff. You're going to find yourself saying, I don't want it around me. This is where we're going. This is good stuff. Are you awake? I mean, I'm just saying, this is just the incredible part of the sanctified life. And this is why, and as a conjunction, I'm still in the last sentence, and this is why all of your sanctified life is by grace and not by works, because all of this, folks, got provided for you in the death, burial, and resurrection. You don't produce this. This all got produced for you. And God says, it's just a free gift. Comes with the package of salvation. You know what's really good? Is that you've got this thing about your old ID with condemnation, change to justification, and abomination, same sanctification. You got 2 more parts of that. And then he's got this other thing where he's going to give you the 3rd part of your new identity, and that's in your exaltation. Oh, I just can't wait till we get over there. This is just good stuff. What sin is attempting to do when Jesus, soul and spirit, his body's not in the heart of the earth, it's his soul and spirit in the heart of the earth. See, when we think about Jesus was in the heart of the earth, you know what our mind pictures for us? Him bodily down there. Where is his body for 3 days and 3 nights? It's in the tomb. Don't think about it that way. I know we just kind of do it, but that's not what's happening. And sin, while his soul and spirit, are in the heart of the earth, sin is attempting to corrupt the body of Jesus. I'm not talking about making it rot away. That's the byproduct of what the Bible is calling corruption. That's why he says, thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither suffer thy Holy One to see corruption. Because here's what sin was trying to do. Before he goes to the cross, how much sin is in Jesus? None. Now, even though we're saved, we still have sin in our members. Was there any sin in the members of Jesus? No. The only time he ever touched sin is when he became the sin bearer for 3 hours on the cross, and when he finished, those sins were done. Actually, they're going to be deposited in hell. Now, when he gets through, so he's not a sin bearer when he gives up the ghost, is he? No. So when he goes into the heart of the earth and now that body's lying, they take that body down off the tomb. Men do that. And men put it in a tomb and roll the stone in the front and post guards out front because that body is empty. And here's what sin is trying to do. Sin wants to worm its way into that body because that's what it does with every body. You understand, I'm not being punished here. I'm saying with every fleshly body. That was a body of flesh, was it not? And that's what it's trying to do. Do you know why? So that when his soul and spirit come back into that body for the resurrection, he will have sin in his members. That's what it's attempting to do. But he does something. That's why I said this is so good. Because when you understand, and by the way, this is the longest period. 6 hours on the cross, 3 hours as a sin bearer, instant resurrection, 3 days and 3 nights in the tomb. And does sin have plenty of opportunity to do its work in that body? And do you know why let me ask you this. Had Jesus' body physically decayed at all in 3 days and 3 nights? Do you remember what Martha said about Lazarus' body, her brothers? It was just 4 days, and she said, and by now, he's stinking. 3 days and 3 nights. You're right on the threshold of 4, aren't you? That body hadn't decayed at all, and the reason the body didn't decay is because it didn't corrupt. Not the same thing. One is a byproduct of the other. Okay? I know, I'm just talking, I'm not showing you verses, I'm just setting it up for you. That body, sin wanted to corrupt that body so that Jesus would have sin in his members. And by the way, if it had corrupted that body, the byproduct would have been that body would have begun to do what? Decay. It would have done like every other body would have done. And so that's what sin is trying to do. And he's saying, and by the way, I'm just so excited about this truth, I can't get it out. The words are just piling up, you know. I had a slow lady on the exit ramp and we all just piled up. Okay. Sorry. Let me see how I can say this. I just need to think. Don't say what with. Because sin was trying to corrupt the body of Jesus, and as a byproduct of that, caused that body to decay. If it could have done that, you realize that in that sense, there would have been no resurrection. All of this is part of a whole, and every part has to be right. You understand? Everything has to be done perfectly. In the burial, Jesus, in 3 days and 3 nights, was providing for something that you are supposed to be identified with in your sanctified life that keeps sin from doing something in you. Now, just hold on to that thought and think about this. And even though we are identified in His likeness, I want you to understand that the way He goes in to death is different from the way we go in. He doesn't die with sin in His members. And He certainly doesn't die with a body of sin. If you have a body of sin, what does that mean? Okay, but what does that mean? You're not saved. Because that's the old master-slave relationship. He doesn't go into death with a body of sin, does He? And neither does He go into death with sin in His member. That's what you and I have now that we're saved. Sin didn't get eradicated for us, and we are still in a body with a brain that's running things that's not redeemed. And because of that, because of the difference in those bodies, now let's talk about us. When we got a new identity, we got all this new stuff, but at the end of this thing, at the end of your sanctified life, you're going to get another new something. What are you getting? A new body. You're going to get a new body. And I'm going to tell you now that body, we need to talk about this. We need to have a talk. That body is not flesh and blood. That body is not flesh or blood. I say flesh and blood because that's the way we talk about this body. And it's not just a flesh body without blood. It's a different kind of body. But when Jesus rose from the dead, His resurrection body had properties to it that are very much, our bodies are going to have properties that are very much like His, in that, if you remember on the Emmaus Road, after His resurrection, when He walks along with those disciples on the road and He goes, "Why are you so sad and cast down?" And they said, "Are you a stranger to Jerusalem and you don't know the things that have happened, that Jesus has been crucified and we thought it was He that would have brought in the kingdom, and now it's been 4 days since these things happened." So it was the first day of His resurrected life. And you know what He begins to do? It says as they walked along, He opened the Scriptures. He said, "Oh, slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have written. Know you not that these things ought to have happened?" And it says He began at the prophets and opened their understanding. As they're walking along, they get to the place where they live and they say, "You've got to," and you know what? They didn't know who He was. There was something about that body that they didn't know who He was. And they said, "You got to come in and eat supper with us." And when He goes in, at a point, they now recognize Him for who He is. That body can now be seen, that they know that's Him. And here's what the Bible says. And when they knew Him, He vanished out of their sight. So here's that body, has the ability to be seen, but not as the body it is. Has the ability to be seen and recognized, and has the ability to not be seen. Now, in that way, our bodies will have that kind of property. But there's something else I want you to remember about the body of Jesus, because he does come out with the same physical body. It is something different about it? Yes. That's part of that newness of life. There's something different about it. How do you know it's still that body that went in the tomb? How do you know? Because Thomas said, I won't believe until I do what? Put my hand in the nail prints and in his side. And when Jesus shows up and Thomas is in the room that time, what's the first thing he says to Thomas? What is still in the hands of the resurrected Lord? The prints. Does Thomas put his hand in there? It says he just falls down because he knows who it is. I messed up. My Lord and my God, he said. He knows who it is. He knows. Here's my point. Why didn't Jesus come out with a brand new body? No prints. Heck, was that just for Thomas? No. No, had nothing to do with that. Even though Thomas foolishly said, I won't believe it. What if Jesus had come out with a body that didn't have any of those prints? It was totally healed up. What would Thomas have thought? It doesn't matter. You either believe, but the point is, that wasn't for Thomas. That's not why the prints were still there. And as preachers, we've always talked about that. Jesus is going to bear the scars of his death for us throughout eternity. And he will. We get a brand new body. A body where every head looks like this. And Bob's. I know, you don't even want to go now, do you? Okay, here, not ladies, just men. Okay. Here's the deal. All the ladies look like this. Isn't that great? Okay. Here's the point. He comes out of that grave with the exact body, with the print still there, with the spear mark still in his side, to prove that sin was unable to corrupt that body on any level. If it was us, we can't have this body. Do you know why? It has sin in its members. Jesus says, I can take that body because it's as good today as it was the day I left it on the cross. And what he does, I want to talk about this next week, because we don't have time to do it today. But what he does is, he literally wears sin out on the cross. Literally. To such a degree that when he leaves that body, sin just falls in a heap at the foot of the cross, and it doesn't even have the strength to crawl to the tomb. I'm just trying to paint a picture to say to you, sin wants to do what it has always done in a body. And but it's going to do it with Jesus' body only when he's dead. Is it going to corrupt our body while we're still alive? That's what it's going to seek to do. And next week we'll talk about how sin seeks to corrupt you, because you still have sin in the members of your body. And your brain is working in connection with all of that. And you've got to see what's happened with that, because this is the provision that's been made for you in his burial. But with Jesus, he had no sin going in, so the only way sin has a chance to worm its way into that body is when it's vacant and lying in state for 3 days in a tomb. And for 3 days and 3 nights, sin tries to get its way into that body. And it's just like it just can't make any headway. It just can't get in there. And when Jesus comes back, he doesn't need a new one because the old one's perfect. He just gets back in that body. And that's the demonstration, folks. That's the public display that sin has absolutely no hold or hook in him whatsoever. And he says, not only, by the way, the resurrection was the proof of that. If it had of, the resurrection, you do understand, here at the cross, remember the 5 mandates of the Davidic covenant? Redeemer, Deliverer, Avenger, King, and Blesser. Remember that? The only one of those 5 that was ever in doubt was the Redeemer. Because everything else that he said he would do, promised by the covenant to David. Now back here is where he made that promise, in the interlude of mercy. You went through God's plan and program with Israel. You understand that at David and Solomon, God stopped all those cycles of judgment, and he gave them unprecedented years of prosperity and peace and affluence and crops, and they had more land. I mean, everything they ever dreamed was there. And God's saying, this is just a little taste of the kingdom. And I'm going to make a covenant with you that of the seed of David, I'm going to raise up from the line and seed of David a Messiah to sit on the throne of Israel. He said, and that guy, that seed, is going to function as the Redeemer, and in the day of wrath as your deliverer, and then your avenger when he comes at his advent, and your king and blesser in the kingdom. But the only one, because all of those folks, all of those hinged on this one. And if this one failed in any part, none of those others could have come to pass. But because they stem directly out of the successful redemptive act of the Redeemer, if this one happens, all of those are guaranteed. Because the power to do these is vested in this. That's why when Jesus rose from the dead, you remember one of the first things he says? All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. You know what he's saying? Everything that was ever promised we were going to do, it's a done deal. I'm just waiting for the time. We're just watching the clock. And he knows that that's the only one. And so all of this is hinged right here. And what sin is attempting to do there is exactly what it's attempting to do with you and me. We don't come out of salvation with a redeemed body because we didn't go in with a redeemed body. Jesus did. When I say redeemed, you understand, a body without sin at all. So when we come back the next time, I need to talk to you more about this corruption issue. Because I want you to understand how it is that sin is going about trying to affect your sanctified life, and what Jesus did in 3 days and 3 nights to make it so that instead of living, in spite of living in a body with sin in its members, we are able to produce fruit, I'm using the Bible term here, that is so precious to God. It is as though he took this perfect peach off of a tree and he set it on his desk and he said, I want to look at this and I want to admire this, and I want this around me all the time because that's the fruit I've been waiting to see produced. That's what he's looking for from you and me. That fruit unto holiness that he wants around. It's so valuable to him, and that's what makes it holy. God says, if it's holy, I want it around me all the time. And if it's not, I don't want it around me. He says, I want your life right here and now to put on display my great wisdom And my great grace that allows you to produce that kind of fruit while you're still living in a body with sin in its members, because God says that brings me much glory. What a